You're listening to another episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns.
That's right, everybody. It's another live football episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns. As always, it's your guy, Bully Rye. And alongside me to talk all things football is my co-host, Banker Bill. Bill, what's up, bud?
What's happening, Ryan? We had a week off.
We did kind of had a week off, but it wasn't a really good week off.
No, it wasn't.
It was
not
definitely
one we
not
relive.
Yeah, it was definitely not ideal, let's say. For those of you, I guess we can go ahead and just start the show talking about it. For those of you who have been living under a rock and not been paying attention to the news or to your weather reports, the Southeast has been ravaged with hurricanes the last 2 weeks. The Western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, the Tampa area, and Florida, and certain parts of Georgia was hit by Hurricane Helene. I actually, Bill, just got a text from Lawrence Electric that 264 people continue to remain without power as of today. That is just Lawrence Electric. That does not include Duke Energy or the energy. There's another energy company out in Anderson, South Carolina, where people didn't have power. And it definitely does not include Western North Carolina. That was absolutely devastated. I'm talking cities, towns wiped off the map. I-40 coming back from the Tennessee-North Carolina border has washed away so much that they talked about that I-40 may not be open back up until 2025. And then I spoke with someone today that said that may not be open back up until 2028.
Wow.
So if listen, we're based in the Carolinas. The show is. If there's anything you can do to find out how to donate something, how to help out the folks in the Asheville, North Carolina, the Western North Carolina area, I know they need it. People lost their homes. I want to say they're into the hundreds at least in the death toll up in Western North Carolina. So continue to keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And then Central Florida right now is getting hit by Hurricane Milton. And as that rolls in, they were talking about the flood surges of like 15 feet. That it's I don't know what's going to stop. I don't like the conspiracy theorists that the government are creating the hurricanes to wipe away red states, but that's the world we live in these days. So that is why we didn't get to come on the show last week. Hopefully you went over to social media and saw our game picks and our buys and sells factor crap because Bill didn't have internet last week. I was very fortunate and grateful to have internet back before I got my power back, and I was not without power that long. So very grateful for that, but there are still people now dealing without having power almost 2 weeks after the hurricane struck the upstate of South Carolina and Western North Carolina. So, continue to keep those people in your thoughts and prayers, continue for those able to listen to stay safe yourselves. And yeah, so I guess without further ado, we can sort of take that into the show and sort of get started. I think, first of all, thanks to everybody who is watching the show live with us. We got a viewer over on YouTube. I believe that might be Volley Polly, who had some questions that I'm going to need to bring up at some point. And then there might be a couple of viewers over on Instagram. Matt Buck was over there, and 323 College Shame Day was in the chat for a little minute. So hopefully he'll stick around for it. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with my favorite segment of the show, and that is Homer's Corner. Bill, would you like to start off Homer's Corner this week?
Yeah, I don't have a tremendous amount to talk about, unfortunately, with my teams. Congratulations to the Miami Dolphins for actually picking up a win without Tua Tagovailoa. That doesn't happen very often in the last couple of years. So I'm very excited about that. Snoop Huntley, Tyler. Did you know that's his nickname, by the way? They call him Snoop.
I don't get it. I don't know where that came
from.
Tyler
Huntley's nickname is Snoop. So he had a decent enough game, and the defense showed out even without Jalen Phillips after his season was ended by a knee injury last week. And they picked up a win against the rival New England Patriots, which you really shouldn't call that a rivalry. But the good news is the whole entire AFC East stinks, and the Dolphins are still in contention to win that division. Obviously, only one, and I guess you call it 1.5 games back because they lost to Buffalo. But congratulations to them. That is not my Homer's Corner. I'm just excited about it. However, my Homer's Corner is the state of Florida Gators football. While I sit here with my Rutgers hat and my Rutgers shirt, go Rutgers. You're welcome, Dad. But Florida Gators football is in a sad state of affairs, I guess, right now, because this week it came out that the Florida Gators lost their number one wide receiver recruit to the University of Miami. I don't know if you remember the Miami game. The Miami team, as they were walking off the field, some genius in the University of Florida decided to put their recruits next to the tunnel that Miami was leaving in after the game. After they had blown out the Florida Gators, they stood there and the recruits were talking to the Miami players, and the Miami players, and it's on video, were saying things like, come play with us. We run this state. And well, right now Miami does. So one of those players might have been there that day. I don't know. I know he was at the UCF game last week that Florida did win, but he decommitted from Florida this week and committed to the University of Miami. With that, the news came out that people are now saying that Billy Napier will have to beat Tennessee in order to save his job this week. And I will say this, if your job or hinges on whether or not you're going to beat Tennessee in Tennessee, you got problems. Man, does all of this make me sad. And Ryan, I know you're not a Florida Gators fan. Obviously, we kind of root for each other's teams and want to see them do well. I do that with South Carolina as well. But man, this is a tough situation to be in right now. I guess the only good news, the only thing that makes me feel a little bit better is if we're not in a good place and we're not going to win right now, as this roster continues to get better, even though he's losing some recruits, I still think he's got a better roster than he's had in the last few seasons than he has had. But if we can't win with this roster, then he's got to go. He's got to go. That's kind of how you see it, right? This is his third season. We've only made one bowl since he's been there, and it was the first year. I feel like at this point, got to win, man. We got to win.
Yeah, listen, I heard a radio host talk about the fact that, like, years ago, Florida was the destination coaching job. Florida's a destination place to go play football.
I think it still is. I do still feel like it still is, because it is still Florida. It's still that stadium. It's still that fan base. It's still that group of people. It just doesn't have the leadership right now. And I think that's what it's missing.
Y'all haven't been competitive since the late 2000s. Like, y'all haven't won.
We had a 2 straight 10-win seasons like 4 seasons ago with Dan Mullen. We were in the Kadarius Toney Bowl when Kadarius Toney caught 200 yards in the SEC title game against Alabama, and I almost beat them with Kyle Trask. We were a good team when Kyle Trask was there. That's not that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not the same Florida
Hasn't
Gators
been as dominant. Hasn't been as dominant. It hasn't been Tebow and Chris Leak and those players that were the mid 2000s when you knew Florida was going to be in the top 5 almost every single season. The reality was, Ryan, it might feel like that we were that good for a while. Florida never really was. Florida was only good in the mid 90s to about the mid 2000s, but it was and is a destination. I in my opinion.
323 College Shame Day over on Instagram watching with us says, not to mention Florida's schedule for the rest of the season, Napier could be well out well before Thanksgiving.
Yes, it's awful. We hit so many tough teams going down the stretch, and I actually thought Ole Miss might be weaker than I thought, and then they stomped you guys out. So I'm scared of them as well. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I thought Ole Miss wasn't as good as we thought after they took a loss, and which makes zero sense, by the way.
Yeah, but, let's talk about the fact that South Carolina gets to play 2 top 15 teams back to back after they both take upset losses. Like, it's one of those things. Like, South Carolina's got a shot, and then Alabama gets beat by Vanderbilt. Like, oh yeah. Alabama's going to take it on somebody, and we got to go to Tuscaloosa to have it done.
Yeah.
Listen.
Hey,
for
listen.
your sake,
we're dealing with that. Back to Florida. We're dealing with that this week. Tennessee took a loss they probably shouldn't have taken last week to Arkansas. They're going to come for blood this week in Tennessee. Was it Knoxville? That's not going to be a fun place to be for a Florida Gators fan. And you know how much I care about that team. I don't like to watch them get stomped on. So I may or may not tune into the game on Saturday.
Well, the other problem is I just talked about the way the I-40 looks. If people are driving up to the game, they're going to have to find alternate routes to get to Knoxville because I-40 you can't drive up there to get there. You're going to have to fly, and not to mention with the hurricane hitting Florida, I'm assuming, or I would hope, that the team has already left. Otherwise, I don't know.
I would think.
I don't know what the airport would look like if they tried to fly out, because obviously you can't take a bus. They got to charter a plane at this point. I don't know. That's going to be a weird situation.
Gainesville is pretty far north of where that hurricane's tracking or supposedly going to go at this point. But like you said, it's not going to be good. They would probably, what do they leave on? Probably So the weather's
Yeah.
probably not going to be great for them. So I don't know how this is all going to work in logistics, the whole thing. But I just either it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the game's played on Monday. They're to play the Volunteers after losing, and I don't even know how to say his last name. I'm Ilimaliva. However you say Nico's name. That guy's fantastic, even though he had a bad week.
Oh, somebody like did the phonetical spelling. I'm like, oh, I can say it, and now I've already forgotten to say it.
Yeah. It took me long
All
enough
right.
to figure out how to say Tagovailoa like that. And that's not even that hard. Like it
sounds racist. You only get one name that I can't pronounce that I figure out. Everything else is just going to be like TJ Hushmanzada. I'm going to call it whatever I want to call it.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to deal with it. My Homer's Corner goes in a little different situation because it has nothing to do with one team or another, but this new fad about brandishing a weapon in celebrations, be it for sacks or touchdowns or whatever the case is. We've seen some really bonehead plays in college football this year called back because of a player brandishing a fake gun in a celebration. I think it was LSU a few weeks ago that hit a big play, and it may have been Florida. I don't know.
Was not Florida. Florida did not do this. Yeah, no.
So maybe it was Georgia.
Don't put that on me, Ryan.
Maybe it was Georgia, considering that the stuff that they're going through right now. But they make a big play and they get up and act like they're like doing these finger guns, like they're shooting their opponent right in front of officials. They get flags thrown. It's unsportsmanlike conduct, 15 yards. Last week against Ole Miss, we're down 24-3, and our star freshman defensive end Dylan Stewart gets up after a big sack on third down that would have forced a punt. Gets up and stands over the quarterback and does it. Draws the flag. 15 yards. Ole Miss, I think, would go on to at least. I think it wasn't 24-3 at the time. They might have gone on to score on that drive. But nevertheless, Shane Beamer come out and said that the punishment's been dealt with in-house, and that he's a good kid, and tried to explain why that's a bad thing. My question is, when did this become a thing? I've seen it in the NFL this year where a flag was thrown. I've seen it obviously in college all over the place. I don't know when this thing became a thing. Like, go back to like taking the penalties for dunking on the goalpost, like Jamison Williams did a couple weeks ago on Monday Night Football. That's like, I don't know if they're trying to mix Call of Duty in with their college with the football world, but it's not a good look for football. Listen, people are always looking for a reason to come after professional sports, to come after amateur sports, because of the money these guys make and the I don't know how to say this, but it's the really far right wing that likes to put some negative connotations around athletes. And when you have a school like Georgia that has people getting arrested every single year, be it either, I think their latest arrest was I guess a guy apparently had beat up his pregnant girlfriend. The reckless driving, the Ray Rice situation. There's a dark cloud over athletics because of things that the athletes have done to put themselves in the public eye. 323 College Shame Day on Instagram also says Justin Wally from Minnesota. I guess he did something similar, but I don't know where this came from. But this is not a good light for any sport. Whether you hit a home run and you do that same celebration, the brandishing a weapon celebration, if you will, after you hit a home run. I mean, it's getting to the point where like people do like the bow and arrow thing, and they're getting penalized for that too. Like, I guess if you ban one, ban them all. But considering that, like, the image that the sports have amongst people who don't watch the sport, this is just going to further that narrative that sports have not the best people playing them. And I think that whoever started this trend ought to be like exposed. And I think that people just need to stop doing it. Like, I don't care who you are. Every single football team in America, be it college or pro, they need to go in a team meeting this week and they need to say, hey guys, I don't know where this started, but we're finishing it. And if you get a penalty for doing something like it, you're either not going to be on this team, you're not going to be a starter, or you're going to be running laps the next practice. Everybody else is going to be getting better. You're just going to be running. Like, I don't care what it is. I'm going to run this out of you. pretty short, sweet to the point, but it's a bad look, and just an awful. I don't know where it came from, but I wish it would stop. A quick reminder: if you are watching the show on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, join the comments, leave a comment, join the conversation. Dylon is back over here. Rye guy, he's over in the Instagram chat. Red Dawn 426 just joined. I'm not sure who that is, but thank you for being here with us tonight. We got a comment here. This is over on YouTube. Casio on the left with bad internet. Right guy. Remember that now. I don't know what that means.
Probably saying because I look like I'm underwater all the time, and we don't know why.
I don't know what Casio on the left guy with bad. I don't know what that means. I don't know what Casio means. All right, let's move on here. Thanks for joining the show. Sun Hat VR.
I think it's your problem, Ryan. I can't figure out why I look like I'm underwater. You're like as gorgeous as can be. Looking at the stream. I'm just saying, just looking at the stream, and I'm underwater, and I've switched computers. Like we've done multiple things here, and I don't know why that's happening.
Maybe it's because I'm hosting the stream at my house. That's the only thing
I should host the stream and see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm kidding. Maybe we do. Listen, maybe we eventually go up. Maybe we eventually go up to the clock tower and do a live podcast.
Hey, they would like that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got college football to talk about, and last week was the first upset weekend of the year. Is 5 teams in the top 11 lose in week 6. Some really head scratchers here. Now, we both took Texas A&M last week to beat Missouri. I didn't think they were going to beat them that bad. Number 9 goes down 41-10 against Texas A&M. Southern Cal loses to Minnesota 24-17, the number 11 team in the country. Bill, welcome to the Big Ten. I mean, were you surprised to see Southern Cal get knocked off by all teams Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, after beating LSU at the beginning of the season, the Southern Cal has not looked as good as, honestly, I guess after beating LSU, my expectations were raised. I did not expect a tremendous amount out of Southern Cal because I'm not a huge fan of their coach. He turned tail and ran from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. I think he should be on the hot seat at this point because he's lost, 2 of his first 5 games this season, and it's supposed to be a pretty good team. Getting beat by Minnesota, not a good look. Not a good look at all. So I was surprised. We had a lot of surprises this week, though. I saw an article early in the week that week 2 was the least hyped week we had all season prior to this past week. And week 2 was a crazy week. And then this week, we only had one ranked-on-ranked matchup. And then you've got all these upsets from these teams that you absolutely would not expect to beat the teams that they beat.
So Dylan over the Instagram chat wants to ask a question. Y'all blasted me about Caleb Williams. Had I started him over Dak, I would be 5-0 in Dynasty. Not taking anything away from Jaden Daniels. Come on. I think Williams is solid. Listen, they were playing the Panthers, who pretty much plays decent defense. Oh, no, this was 2 weeks ago. I forgot who Chicago played that week.
Last week?
No, because we weren't here last week. So it was 2 weeks ago. I have to go back and look at that record. Listen, he's only had 2 300-yard games as a pro. One was against the Colts, and one was against the Panthers.
They played the Rams that week, 2 weeks ago. And they won 24-18. And he didn't even play all that well. Matt Stafford outplayed him. So, listen, just because Dak had a bad game, look, that Dak Prescott every single week will be the recommendation over Caleb Williams. I do not care what teams they play.
Well, let's get back here to the discussion at hand. Number 10 Michigan loses 27-17 to Washington. Washington welcomes themselves into the Big Ten by winning the rematch of national championship game from last season. You talked about it before. Tennessee loses to Arkansas, the number 4 team in the country, going down. But the biggest upset, potentially the biggest upset of the season, the biggest upset of the decade, the biggest upset of the century, Vanderbilt.
That's a long time.
Well, we're in the next century. We started in 2000.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, we're
not rolling 100 years. It's not a rolling 100 years.
I would put this up against App State over Michigan. Vanderbilt Commodores, the stopping post of the SEC. The only time Vanderbilt was any good were the years that they beat South Carolina when James Franklin was their head coach.
Nobody remembers that.
Of course, nobody remembers that. That's what I'm saying. Vanderbilt, who has been sort of back and forth this season, takes a home win against number 1 Alabama. It was their first win in Alabama in 28 tries. It was their first ever win over a top 5 opponent. Vanderbilt gets a huge win. Volley actually had a question. I don't know if we can answer it because I don't know as much about Vanderbilt as I would like to. Do you see Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia as more of a practice squad or a UFL quarterback? I mean, I don't know how to answer that because I haven't watched. So Bill, I'm gonna let you take the question.
I have to be honest, Volley. I can't believe you're actually asking that question about a Vanderbilt quarterback. That's my first shock. Secondly, who cares? Seriously, like honestly, who cares? No. Is he going to ever be anything? No. He's 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. He went to Vanderbilt. If he makes anything of his football career, good on him, but I don't think we expect to see him be in any kind of pro football talk going forward. I did hear this, though. Vanderbilt, slow your freaking roll, man. I know you just beat Alabama. You know what they came out this week and said? We deserve a shot at the playoffs. We deserve a shot at going to the playoffs, even though they've already lost 2 games because they beat Alabama. Ease down. All right. This is the reason they play the games. Anybody can beat anybody on any given Saturday. You can shock the world. But when you end up going 5-7, stop. You're not the UCF 2017 team. Like we're not winning the national championship because you beat one team.
And they get Kentucky this week, also looking to prove themselves. Yeah, they lost to Georgia State in week 2.
Yes.
And Missouri by 3 in week 3. Yeah, I mean, listen, they got a chance to prove it after Kentucky. If they got to win the Kentucky game, obviously. Then the next week they get Ball State. And on October 26th, they get to play at home. Listen to this. They get to play
another one.
Game
another one
against Texas.
Number 1, Texas.
In a million years, I would have never expected to utter the words Texas at Vanderbilt in a regular season football game. That's crazy. And then they get Auburn, South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee. It's still a murderer's row for Vanderbilt. I'm with you. Slow your roll. You beat Alabama. Great. South Carolina once beat Vanderbilt and lost to Kentucky the next week. Let's see if Vanderbilt does the same thing. They knock off number 1 Alabama at home and then plays Kentucky and see if they can't.
I will say this, Ryan. How much you want to bet game day goes to Vanderbilt, heads over to Nashville, if Vanderbilt and Texas both win every game until they meet each other on October 26th. That would be, I'd say that almost be a guarantee because Vanderbilt by then at 5, what would that be, 5-2, would certainly be ranked.
I mean, listen, if they want to try to, first of all, Nashville is apparently a great town.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it would be a fun time for someone like Pat McAfee to go to Vanderbilt. Not to mention having to watch Nick Saban go and eat crow. After he went on the Pat McAfee show and said there's a lot of tough places in the SEC to play, but Vanderbilt ain't one of them. And then his
only one. There was one easy place to play in the SEC, and he said it was Vanderbilt. That was awesome.
And then Alabama gets beat by Vanderbilt at home. That's what a crazy. Listen,
you saw they played that on the scoreboard. They played it on the scoreboard as they were taking the goalposts out of the stadium.
Yep. It's congratulations to Vanderbilt. I know what it felt like when South Carolina beat Alabama back in 2010. So I know the joy they must be feeling. What's up, Volley Polly in the chat over on YouTube? Let me see if we got anything from Instagram. I don't know if I can add you to the box, Dylan, because I'm on a different app, not through Instagram, and I don't know how to add you to that right now. So listen, one week we'll have you on because we used to have guests on the show all the time, and we'll have you on. You can come talk ball with us and pick games with us and stuff like that. You can be our first guest picker. So send me a DM on Instagram and we can talk about it next time. Maybe next week or the week after, where we can get you on the show and have you talking with us. Everything being said, Bill, let's go on with college football. After all these upsets, do you think that we have a clear-cut number 1 in the country after week 7? And is it Texas?
Yeah, I think it's Texas. I think it's pretty simple. It's Texas. We've watched Texas lose their starting quarterback and their backup quarterback, Arch Manning, came in and dominated as well. I think they're the best team in football. They've not really been tested a tremendous amount. Their biggest win has been Michigan. They have a huge game this week, and we'll find out for sure if they should be the number 1 team and are the number 1 team going forward.
Yes, the first ever Red River rivalry game.
Say that fast.
In the SEC, if you look at the top of the SEC standings, Texas A&M and Texas are currently tied at the one spot for the top of the SEC. Can you imagine? Well, they play each other in the last week of the season. I heard on the radio that the cheapest tickets going for that game were like $450 because it's been so long since they played each other.
Yeah.
But
true.
you know, if it works out that way, we could see Texas and Texas A&M play back-to-back weeks, one in the regular season, one for the SEC championship. But if you look at the rest of the country, you got Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, all undefeated at your 1 through 4 spot. And then your next highest ranked undefeated team is Miami at 6. And then Iowa State at 11, BYU at 14, Indiana at 18, and Pittsburgh at 5-0 down at number 22. Listen, I'm with you. Texas, number 1. I'm not sure if Ohio State's got a big game this week. We're going to pick in podcast pick'ems. Oregon is going to play host to Ohio State, so one of those teams will fall from the unbeaten this weekend. And then I think we all sort of expect Penn State to eventually play that murderer's row in the Big Ten, where they have to play Ohio State, they have to play Michigan. I don't know if Michigan is the challenge that we thought they might be, but interesting to see what Penn State can do going forward. College football, this may take a couple of minutes, and I promise you I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but we kind of have to. News broke earlier today that the NCAA approved a plan to eliminate the National Letter of Intent program. This is an ESPN article from Eli Letterman that went out today. So I'm quoting directly from it. Established in 1964, the NIL program has existed as the formal binding agreement between prospective athletes and college programs for the last 60 years. The NLI will be, and it's weird because it's NIL that we talk about, but the NLI will be replaced by a new financial aid agreement that will provide many of the same core functions as the NLI and will likely be tied to a contract related to an impending revenue sharing model across college athletics. Under new rules, transfer athletes will be allowed to sign with a new school after they formally enter the transfer portal. Per the NCAA, once a prospect has signed a written offer of athletic aid, other schools will be, quote, prohibited from recruiting communications. So if you haven't been paying attention, there has been an impending sort of a lawsuit that will allow colleges and universities to pay their players as school employees, not just as student athletes. And it's another quote from the article. The Division I Council's move to nix the NIL or NLI comes as the NCAA and college athletics prepare for a sweeping change via the impending House settlement, which is set to grant roughly $2.8 billion in damages to former and current college athletes to pave the way for college programs to begin paying athletes more than $20 million annually as soon as next fall. A final hearing to approve the settlement is scheduled for April of 2025. Bill, we have talked about on this show the demise of college athletics as we know it.
Yeah.
I before I actually read through this what doing away with NLI meant, I was like, well, I guess it doesn't mean if you sign on the dotted line anymore, because you can just go ahead and back out. But it sounds like you're still going to have to sign an agreement of financial aid in order to sign with a school. Is this as big as news as I thought it was when I said it, or is this just another puzzle piece, another domino falling to the eventual employment of student athletes as professional football players?
Yeah, I think it's not as big a deal as I think my response to you, because you texted it to me today, and my response was, "What WTF?" Like, what? Like, what do you mean? I mean, it sounds like, hey, we're not going to make the kids commit anymore because they just decommit and they, whatever, and and transfer and all that good stuff. But no, it just sounds like they're just gonna. It's a new name for it, and like you said, we're moving towards actually paying the players, which I don't think any of us really disagree with. I think that's what we thought NIL was going to be, and then maybe some, a little bit of money on the side if somebody could, go to a car dealership and be in the local car dealers commercials, that kind of thing. It's kind of got blown up a lot more than that, with someone like Arch Manning being paid $3 million a year, to sit the bench at Texas. That's a little different than what we probably expected it to be. But yeah, I think it's good that, the guy that gets on scholarship, that's the third string, defensive end that's barely ever going to see the field, is actually going to get paid to be in school, paid to go to practice, paid to, not be able to have a job because his job is practicing with the football team, and he can afford food and things like that. I think that's what we're looking for, because I know we heard, was it the UAB team a few years ago before they got rid of the program that brought it back? Like, those guys were literally starving. Like, they couldn't get jobs and they couldn't afford food. And so I think this is a good thing. And, I think we're just moving towards something a little bit different, a little bit of a pay structure. And I don't mind that at all.
It's funny you mentioned you mentioned Arch Manning. Dylan over on Instagram said, "Dude, Arch Manning making more money than a lot of rookies in the NFL, and he's not wrong."
And Brock Purdy.
And Brock Purdy. Also,
Yeah.
welcome Will Small and Tyler over to the Instagram feed. Daniel Cowan was in here a minute ago, another fellow comedian. So I don't know if he's still in here, but thanks for joining if you are, or if you did. You mentioned the UAB kids starving. Not being able to find work. I'm not sure. I believe this is an NCAA rule, but if you are on athletic scholarship, I believe it prohibits you from getting a paying job.
Oh, because they might pay you too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I actually had a friend who played football at University of South Carolina, and it was the off season. He was interning as part of his college degree to do an internship. And he told me, like, no, we can't get paying jobs while you're on scholarship. Not to mention, not just they could pay you too much, but like, let's say you do an internship at Costco, and you're stocking backroom shelves, and a pallet falls over on you and you get hurt. Like now, or if you're getting paid to work at Costco and a pallet, you get hurt, and now your season's over because you dropped a pallet of milk on your foot and you broke bones in your foot. You can't play anymore. So, listen, I don't disagree with you. I think the big scary monster of the kids aren't being paid, this ruining college. Listen, college football has been ruined years ago. People have been paying players for decades.
Thanks, Nick Saban.
Dylan also mentioned SMU joining the ranks of the top 25. Their only loss this year is to BYU. But SMU got caught up in a paying scandal that essentially crippled their program.
Ever. Yeah. For years.
Years. You hear stories about the University of Miami going on boats and messing with strip clubs and stuff like that. So, like, college football has been sort of a seedy underbelly for quite some time. And I think now they're finally catching up with trying to do it the right way. And even putting a salary cap, even if it's $20 million per school per year, to try to pay these college athletes, you're still going to have the under the money table. You're still going to have NIL drawing people to them. There's no perfect way to structure college football that adds real parity. I mean, you're going to have like what we had this week, where a team like Vanderbilt can shock Alabama, where an unranked Washington team is able to knock off a top 10 Michigan team. You're going to have that just everybody. It's any given Saturday, any given Sunday, it's going to happen. But for the most part, the powers of college football, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Michigans to an extent, those teams are always going to be relevant because of the NIL, the money coming in from the donors, from the boosters, and regardless of a revenue sharing model, it's never going to change. We're getting some more activity over on stream. There's a few people watching on Facebook, a few people on YouTube. Thanks for joining the show with us live. If you want to join the conversation, leave a comment wherever it is that you're listening, and we'll read them on the air and allow you to be part of the conversation. And as we move on from college football, we get into the NFL talk. And the big news that broke this week was that of the news that Robert Saleh, head coach of the New York Jets, was fired after his 2-3 start this year. First time the Jets have had a midseason coaching change since 1976, when Lou Holtz quit. Yes, that Lou Holtz. 11 years before I was born was the last time the Jets made a move midseason. Saleh went 20-36 as the head coach of the Jets. He never won more than 7 games in a single season. But I think all signs point to the fact that he can all try to say all the right things publicly. This is Aaron Rodgers firing the coach, right? Yeah. I mean,
yes,
I think
100%.
Everybody
you can
knows
hear my head rattle, but absolutely that's what's going on.
I mean, I have been, at one point, we called Aaron Rodgers Voldemort on this show.
Yep.
Because I was sick of talking about him. There's a rumor going around, a report that has not been verified, that Robert Saleh was set to demote Nathaniel Hackett from offensive coordinator, and the next morning he was fired and escorted off the premises by security. He was not allowed to talk to the team before he left the facility. I don't know how to pose this question, Bill. Is this an Aaron Rodgers problem or is this a New York Jets problem? Because I think the Jets had the number 5 defense in the NFL before Saleh was relieved. Saleh has been proven to be a solid defensive coach and a defensive coordinator. So having said that, the offense is the reason why the Jets are 2-3. Is this an Aaron Rodgers problem or is this a New York Jets organizational issue?
Both. I'm going to go with both. Nathaniel Hackett is Aaron Rodgers' guy. So Saleh thinking about dropping or demoting him, and I don't know who he would promote in that system. So that probably would upset Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if you watched the game this weekend with the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, I had Mike Williams in my starting lineup just because I have a bad situation going on with my fantasy team right now. Thank you, Tua Tagovailoa, for your head always rattling. But I had Mike Williams playing, and he is a good wide receiver who can't seem to get the ball into his hands. But with that happening, the only person on that team that seems to be playing well is Garrett Wilson, and that's not even a good thing. So Aaron Rodgers looks terrible, and it's terrible. Like the offense looks really bad. The defense plays well. They have great corners there. They have a great front seven, and Aaron Rodgers is just garbage. And is he old? Is he a diva? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is everything that you wanted when you signed Aaron Rodgers and you kept him on the team after he tore his Achilles tendon last year. This is what you were going to get. Everybody that knew football knew that, except for the New York Jets organization. So have fun.
Yeah. Listen, first of all, Dylan over the chat says to pick up the Bills defense in your redraft fantasy football. He also says this is absolutely a Jets problem. 323 College Game Day, College Shame Day says, and the Jets still owe Saleh $10 million for the remaining 2 years on his contract.
I love that kind of stuff. Here's all you needed to know with Aaron Rodgers. When Aaron Rodgers left Green Bay, everybody went, oh no, Green Bay is going to be terrible. Well, guess what? Jordan Love picked up right where he left off. In fact, he probably elevated the team. That's all you needed to know, and the Jets screwed up.
Yeah, you talked about Aaron Rodgers not being able to hit Mike Williams. I had to start Aaron Rodgers because Jared Goff was on a bye. Yes, I am the guy starting Jared Goff at quarterback because I went skill position over quarterback and drafted really late at quarterback. And I'm also my main league. I'm loaded with Lions and I don't know what to do with it. But nevertheless, I started Aaron Rodgers because I'm thinking in London he's got to have a decent day, and he did. Except the fact that he threw 3 interceptions, 6 points in fantasy that you don't get back. And yeah, so I'm with you. It's both the Jets problem and an Aaron Rodgers problem. I said it last year before he got hurt. I don't care if Rodgers is here. The Jets are going to finish last in the division, and then he goes down 3 plays into the season. And now, despite the fact that they're 1 game out of first place in the AFC East, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward because the interim coach promoted to head coach is the defensive coordinator. They didn't promote Nathaniel Hackett to head coach, so I'm not sure if the Jets are better or worse going forward. Trey Davis in the chat. I work with a Jets fan from New Jersey, and he didn't think Saleh was getting fired. Then after he did, he agreed with whatever the owner said. They have the most talent, and they've paid to get, and they're still losing. I agree. They've got. I mean, Mike Williams when he's healthy, he's a great football player. Garrett Wilson had a bunch of receptions in that game against the Vikings. It's hard to believe that Rodgers owned the Vikings for so many years, and he goes to the Jets, and he couldn't beat them. And now we're looking at a 5-0 Minnesota Vikings team, which kind of brings me into the next part of the show where we get back to looking at contenders and pretenders. And there's only 3 teams we're talking about this week. And we're going to start off with the Minnesota Vikings, who knocked off the aforementioned New York Jets in London last week. They are one of, I believe, 2 undefeated teams left in the NFL. I'd have to double check that. I want to say it's either 2 or 3. But the Sam Darnold-led Minnesota Vikings are 5-0. Bill, the NFC North may be the most, and I'm not just saying this as a Lions fan, it may be the most competitive division in football. Are the Minnesota Vikings at 5-0 a contender now, or are we going to call them a pretender?
God, really? Like, they have to be a contender. You don't go 5-0 on a fluke. Like, that's to start the season? I mean, that division is terrifying. Every single team in that division has a winning record. That's a terrifying division. And I mean, they have to be a contender. They've beaten teams now. They're winning every week. I mean, what do you mean? Are they contend? I think, if I remember correctly, the Minnesota has one more game and then they go into the bye week. If they go into the bye week undefeated, I mean, they're scary. They're scary. Actually, I think they're in the bye week this week. They're in the bye week this week. They have a bye week. Yeah, they're scary. Now they're going to rest up and then smash everybody for the rest of the season. They're a scary team. You get them
Aaron Jones
coming out
a little
of their bye week.
banged up.
They're preparing you for 2 weeks, preparing for your team.
If Aaron Jones can get healthy, Jordan Addison returned from injury last week. He looks good. Minnesota's good. I hate to say it because you talk about Ryan wrong again. I was wrong, dead wrong about the Minnesota Vikings. I had them as one of the worst teams in football.
Look who they've beaten,
5-0.
Look who they've beaten. The Giants, the 49ers, the Texans, the Packers, and the Jets. Let's say the Jets are 2-3, but everybody expected the Jets to be a decent team. And if they win that game, they're 3-2, and they're tied for their division lead. So these are teams that are not bad teams. They play the Lions. They go to see the Rams. They have the Colts, Jaguars, Titans, and Bears after that. Those are all wins right now.
Yeah.
They're scary. Minnesota's scary.
Real quick, 323 College Shame Day over on Instagram again to backtrack to the Jets. If the Jets don't miss that last field goal in Denver and don't throw that pick marching down the field in Minnesota and end up scoring, this team goes from 2-3 to 4-1, and Robert Saleh may still have a job. And then he also says the Minnesota Vikings are a contender. Their resume leading up to now is solid. Let's talk about the next team on this list, and that goes to the Washington Commanders. A division. I actually just talked about this on the Cat Cave earlier
I love
tonight.
this team. You know why? Because I said they'd be better than we thought they were going
to be. Preseason, you said the Commanders are going to be a lot better than people expect them to be. They lead a division that has a team that 2 or 3 years ago played in a Super Bowl, a team that won the division as recently, I think, as last year, as the Dallas Cowboys, who are perennial playoff teams, and Minnesota's in first place at 4-1. I think we both agree that Jaden Daniels was the quarterback to draft out of this draft. And people are not only considering him as a favorite to win the Rookie of the Year, but as a potential MVP candidate.
Oh, yeah.
Bill, are the Washington Commanders a contender in the NFC?
We're about to find out. They go to visit the Ravens this week, the resurgent Ravens that look like they were going to start the season 0-3. They're winning games now, and we're about to find out how good Jaden Daniels really is. But right now, I mean, the last 2 weeks, they're stomping on teams. They beat the Cardinals that just beat the 49ers in San Francisco. They beat them 42-14. That is a beating in the NFL. And then they went and smacked the Browns around. So and Jaden Daniels, he's learning as he's going. This is what he's doing right now. The best four games to start a season in the history of pro football, completion percentage wise. And now he's going to get, we would assume, unless he's Justin Herbert, that he's going to get better. So, I mean, they're super fun to watch. Have you watched Jaden Daniels play? He plays exactly like he did in college. It's exactly what he was in college.
Do you think Terry McLaurin is thanking the Lord every day that he actually has a quarterback that consistently get him the ball now?
Absolutely. Sam Howell was a laugher. He could throw it a little bit, but
we knew McLaurin was a talented wide receiver.
He is.
And now that he's got Jaden Daniels getting him the ball,
100%.
Austin Thompson in the chat. I hear Bully Rye is a candidate for sexiest man of the year. I thank you. Listen, if Jason Kelsey can win it, so can I. Like, Jason Kelsey is a good looking dude, but if he can rock that beard,
a lot of similarities. You guys are about the same weight.
I'm like a mini Jason Kelsey because I'm like a foot shorter than him.
Yeah,
but I've still got the same body build.
Exactly. I get it.
Yeah. I'll take Billy Bob's number from Remember the Titans, or not Remember the Titans. Varsity
a tan.
Blues.
He's a tan.
He's tan. The only other team we'll talk about, Houston Texans. I think it's safe to say they're going to run away with that division, and that automatically makes the contender. Agree or disagree with that, Bill?
I thought the Houston Texans were falling on their face this season, and suddenly they've just reeled off wins. So yeah, they're the team we thought they were.
In more ways than one, Austin. I'm not reading that comment, but if you're watching the video, you can see what he said. Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's go over because we're getting late and we still got to get to some fantasy football talk here. Let's run through some patience or panic talk here. A lot of the same teams we talked about 2 weeks ago. Let's kind of zip through it here. Cincinnati Bengals are 1-4. They're always say to start off slow, and they somehow pick it up.
Yep.
Bill, is it time to panic on the 1-4 Cincinnati Bengals?
Now that the Baltimore Ravens are winning games, yes. Yeah, it's panic time.
Yeah. You talk about Robert Saleh getting let go. I think there's a solid chance that if the Bengals finish this season as a very disappointing team, I'm talking like even just a losing record, I think there's going to be some widespread changes over in Cincinnati. Let's go over to the New Orleans Saints, who started off the season 2-0 with big wins. A beatdown of the Carolina Panthers, a beatdown of the Dallas Cowboys, and have since rolled off 3 losses in a row. Now, I will mention this because this has been what I've been wanting to get to the whole show. I talked to you about it before the show came on the air, is that I said preseason that at some point, Derek Carr would either play so poorly or at some point he would get hurt. And the rookie 5th-round draft pick out of South Carolina, Spencer Rattler, would come in and get a start, and he would spark this team that was fluttering, win the quarterback job, and potentially take the Saints to the playoffs. Spoiler alert, Spencer Rattler was named the starter for this weekend's contest for the New Orleans Saints as Derek Carr was injured in last week's loss. Bill, considering Derek Carr is now out, I don't know for how long. New Orleans Saints has a new starting quarterback. They are 2-3 after starting off 2-0. Are we being patient or are we panicking with the New Orleans Saints?
You got to panic with this team. You got to panic. I mean, come on. We've lost 3 in a row. You've your first 2 wins were blowout wins. Everybody thought you were real contenders. Trey Toll is coming in saying a bit of a homer's corner, but looking forward to seeing what Rattler can do with his first potential start this weekend. It is not a potential start. He is starting this weekend. We're going to see how he ends up playing. I do not expect great things from Spencer Rattler. Sorry, Ryan. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think it's panic time in New Orleans. We really thought they were a really good team. We saw Alvin Kamara going crazy. We saw Rashid Shaheed going crazy. Olave was involved. And in the last few weeks, man, that has all come crashing down. And it's the same team. It wasn't an injury that created it. It was the same group of guys, and they're losing games now. So yeah, I think it's panic time in New Orleans.
323 College Shame Day says it's time to panic as well. Dennis Allen likes Taysom Hill too much. Expect him at quarterback. Taysom Hill, I think he missed last week or the last 2 weeks with an injury. So it'll be curious to see how they get him into the action. Yeah, Trey, it was confirmed earlier today. Matter of fact, about an hour and a half before we went live, I posted it. It was posted on ESPN on social media that Spencer Rattler will get to start this weekend. Let's move on here. The San Francisco 49ers sitting at 2-3 with a division that seems sort of be fluttering. The Seattle Seahawks, we don't know who they are yet. The Rams, we don't know who they are yet. The Cardinals look really good at times, but can't put complete games together
until last week.
San Francisco still without Christian McCaffrey. We don't know if he's going to be back this season. We did see both George Kittle and Deebo Samuel come back this past week. We talked about the fact that the window is rapidly closing for the San Francisco 49ers. Bill, are we being patient or are we panicking on a 2-3 49ers squad?
I think you have to be patient. That's still the best team in that division. They're only 1 game back of the Seahawks thanks to the Giants getting a win in Seattle this week. Nobody expected that. Yeah, Daniel Jones played well. Figure that one out. But I think the 49ers, they still have the best point differential in that division. They still score more than any team in that division, and they have the best defense in that division. And I still think they're the best team in that division. So I think you just have to be patient with San Francisco. You got to get these players, the injured players that stop this team, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, they have to come back and be healthy, and this team will be fine.
My concern is the fact that of 2 of their 3 losses, they came from teams within the division. They lost 27-24 against the Rams in week 3. And last week, they literally fumbled away that game against the Arizona Cardinals.
Yes.
I think it's almost time to panic on the 49ers.
I just don't feel it. I still think still think that's the best team in that division. All you got to do is win your division. You get in the playoffs. It doesn't matter. You do what you do.
They lost a lot of depth on defense in the offseason. They've been dealing with injuries. I know Jordan, I don't want to say his last name, Jordan Mason has been a pleasant surprise to fill in for the injured Christian McCaffrey, but he's still not Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Ayuk finally had a decent game last week, albeit in the loss. He finally showed up. I think there's too many mouths to feed. and with aging and banged up, injury prone already players, I'm going to pump the, like, let's not call it full blown panic, but let's see. I see some brake lights ahead of me, and I'm going to pump the brakes just to make sure nobody rear ends me in case we do come to a full stop. Is that a fair analogy there?
I think so. I mean, I get what you're saying. Brock Purdy's been a little bit off this season too. I don't know if that's an offensive line situation, but he's usually otherworldly when it comes to passing statistics. And this season so far, he's only got 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. So that's not doing well through 5 games.
And this is not the year to be doing that because I believe this is his contract year. So he's got to pick it back up. Normally people ball out this year, and Brock Purdy's like, yeah, it's okay. You can pay me whatever you want next year. I'll be fine. Next up are your Miami Dolphins, sitting at 2-3. Like you said, they finally get a win without Tua Tagovailoa last week against, albeit the really bad Patriots team, who are themselves making a change at quarterback this week, going with Drake May, the rookie out of North Carolina. The Dolphins are 2-3. We don't know how much longer they're going to sit Tua Tagovailoa.
I do know.
He's reported. He's only got one more week on the IR, correct?
Yes, he's got one more game on the IR. That's against the Colts, the Joe Flacco-led Colts. And I've seen Joe Flacco play in Miami before. Just have to get after that, man. He's having a good season, though, with coming in for AR terrible. Whatever. I don't care what his number is. He's still terrible. But, so we'll see what happens. I think we have to be patient with until Tua gets back. But if Tua gets his bell rung one more time, season's over. And Tua's he's probably done forever. So I think you got to be patient with Miami right now. They needed that win. It would be panic time if they lost every game that Tua wasn't playing. So that would be a problem. But they needed that win. That win was huge. It really doesn't matter at this point what happens with the Colts. They do have a bye week this week, and then Tua's going to be out one more game.
Real quick over on Instagram, College Shame Day says, with the Niners to be patient, Brock is still currently a top 5 quarterback. Defense needs to do the job and not let teams they should beat hang on throughout the game. When it comes to the Dolphins, he says, red alert, Mike McDaniel's seat is getting a little warm. Listen, you've got Devin Achane went down, I believe, with a concussion last week or some sort of injury.
Yeah, and the rookie running back was the highest graded running back in the NFL this week. So Achane can take his time.
I think at the end of the day, I think the offensive line lost some guys in the offseason.
They did. Yep.
And
still have an injury too. Isaiah Wynn's still injured.
So I think if they can shore up the offensive line and get more consistent in the run game, the problem is the Dolphins have to be balanced. Last year, they were able to beat up teams because they couldn't stop Mostert. When Mostert got hurt, Achane came in. They couldn't stop Achane. And when they focused on those guys, it allowed guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to get open deep. They've got to be able to balance the offense. I'm going to continue to be patient with the Dolphins, but if they come back with Tua and struggle when Tua comes back, then it might be more along the lines of patient to panic.
Yeah.
Here's a team that I don't know if we should be panicking about because they have a winning record, but the Green Bay Packers sit at 3-2 at the bottom of the NFC North. I don't know why I put them on here other than to say that, like, it's a hard hill to climb when you've got a winning record and they're still at the bottom of your division. With the Vikings at 5-0, the Lions were a preseason favorite to play for the Super Bowl. The Bears playing well, but not that, Caleb Williams had a couple of decent games. The offense can get going here at times, but a 36-10 win over the Panthers isn't all that impressive. Are we being patient with the Green Bay Packers at this point?
I think so. They've dealt with some quarterback injury. Jordan Love missing some time. Malik Willis played better than I think that we expected. He did win a game. But yeah, that was against, I think that was that Titans game, wasn't it? I think they played in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've lost to the Vikings. They've lost to the Eagles, both teams we expected to be pretty decent. But they beat the Rams this week. So we thought the Rams were playing pretty good football, or at least decent football at 1-3. If you can play decent football at 1-3. But I think we still want to be patient with the Packers, but I think you're right. I think the situation in that division with a team that's undefeated leading that division, and we've been looking at the schedule, we've been talking about the Vikings, and we don't see them losing a ton of games down the stretch here because their schedule isn't super hard for a while. And Detroit, we think Detroit is really good still, even with that one loss and being behind Minnesota. So I think they do have a hill to climb because the teams in their division look really good.
Pedro in the chat saying the NFC North be wildin'. And then to go back, College Shame Day says is interested to see how long Achane is going to be out. All right, we've got some fantasy football to get to. A lot of stuff coming to the NFL, some fun games this weekend. Check your local listings or watch NFL Red Zone like I do on Sunday. Let's get over to fantasy football, buys or sells, in fact or crap. We didn't get to come on the show and talk about this past week, but in the last 2 weeks with my buys and sells picks, I have gone 11-5, and Bill has gone 9-7. And so this week we are going to get right into it here with a quarterback that I'm buying. We've talked about him a good bit here tonight. I'm buying quarterback Caleb Williams this week. He's only projected 17.3 points, but he's home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Bill might consider this very low-hanging fruit. Wait till you get to my tight end sell pick. But they're going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, allowing the most points to opposing quarterbacks in fantasy football this season. The only knock is that they are playing a Sunday 9:30 kickoff over in London. Bill, factor crap buying Caleb Williams this week.
You know what? Just because the Jaguars have been so bad, I can't stand Caleb Williams. I'm not a fan at all.
With you.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get into why. I'm going to give you a fact on this one just because the projection is so low, and the Jaguars are so bad.
All right, let's go over to running back here. We're going to go late, guys, so stick around with us and go late with us tonight so we can get through all these picks. The running back I'm buying this week, it should be no surprise. It's running back Jahmyr Gibbs from the Detroit Lions. He's got a pretty high projection, though, 16.5 at the Dallas Cowboys, who are giving up the 6th most points against running backs in fantasy football this season. A 4:25 kickoff on Sunday. Listen, it doesn't matter if you start Jahmyr Gibbs or if you start David Montgomery. They're both going to score you points in fantasy football. I literally have them both, and I'm starting them both every week until one of them proves to not be quality start in fantasy football. Bill, what say you buy Jahmyr Gibbs going over that 16.5 at Dallas?
I'm looking at when the Dallas has actually played running backs that are worth a darn. The first week they played Cleveland. I don't even know who Cleveland's running backs are at this point.
It's Jerome Ford until Nick Chubb comes back.
Okay, it is Ford, I thought. But they gave up points to Ford. New Orleans had Kamara. He put up a ton of points against them. And then Baltimore with Derrick Henry put up points. It looks like if you have a decent running back, which Jahmyr Gibbs is, because he does receive the ball, that's important, to pull up fantasy statistics. So I'm going to give you a fact on this one too, Ryan. It's because the Cowboys stink at stopping running backs. The only ones that they have stopped are the Giants, who don't really have much of a rushing game as it is. And Pittsburgh, Najee Harris is a low yards per carry guy that doesn't really do anything else.
All right, I'm right there with you. I'm glad that so far that you're with me this week.
Low hanging fruit.
I'm gonna wait till you get to my tight end sell this week. All right, my wide receiver buy this week. I talked about him a second ago. Wide receiver Terry McLaurin for the Washington Commanders. He is projected 16.7, another pretty high projection. So you might call it low hanging fruit, but I'm going on a limb with some high projections, thinking they're going to exceed them. They are at the Baltimore Ravens. Bill talked about this game earlier tonight, who are giving up currently the 5th most points to opposing wide receivers in fantasy. A 1:00 kickoff game in Baltimore. Bill, buy or sell Terry McLaurin, 16.7 exceeding.
You're playing him. You got to buy. That's actually a low projection, in my opinion, for Terry McLaurin in this game. I don't know if anybody watched the Cincinnati-Baltimore game last week, but the Cincinnati receivers had over 300 yards receiving. Now, granted, it is Jamar Chase, but we've been talking about how great Jalen Daniels has been this season, and I don't think that's not going to continue this week. So I think you got to buy Terry McLaurin this week. That's a low projection for him.
All right, let's go over to the tight end that I'm buying this week. And it pains me to say this because I've talked a lot of crap about this guy in the show, and that's tight end Kyle Pitts, former Florida Gator.
Let's go.
Projected 10.1. He's at the Carolina Panthers, allowing the 5th most points to tight ends in football this season. A 4:25 kickoff in Charlotte. Bill, factor crap. Kyle Pitts exceeds 10.1 points.
I'm gonna enlighten everybody how Ryan makes his picks for these buy or sells. He looks at bad defenses and says, what decent players playing against a bad defense this week? And this week, that player is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts had his best week of the season last week, catching 7 passes for 88 yards. He got targeted 8 times, which is a season high. I'd expect that to continue. They've figured out how to pass. That offense is getting better, and Kirk Cousins is going off. So this one's got to be a fact. And I can't stand it. You're just low-hanging fruit everywhere.
I'm not low-hanging fruit here.
What you did, though. It's what you did. You went, who's got a bad defense?
No, I go on a limb and talk about Kyle Pitts because I have done nothing but drag him through the mud since the offseason, since last year. because I don't think he's that good, because it didn't matter what offense he was going to be. I didn't think he was that good. And Kirk Cousins has made Kyle Pitts look like what everybody thought Kyle Pitts was in the first place. So
He is who we thought he was, Ryan.
Until he goes out here and lays an egg and makes us both look dumb. So Bill is so far bought in and giving me a fact on every single one of my picks this week. Let's go over to sell. And my quarterback that I'm selling this week is none other than Trevor Lawrence. People are starting to question if he is the guy in Jacksonville going forward. He's projected 18.3 points against the Chicago Bears this weekend at home. The Chicago Bears giving up the fewest points to opposing quarterbacks this season. This was another low-hanging fruit game. But, again, they're going to London. I think anything can happen when they go overseas, but I'm still selling the 18.3 points. Bill, I'm guessing you're going to give me a factor crap since I gave you a low-hanging fruit here again.
It's got to be fact. I mean, you're putting a bad quarterback this season against the best passing defense in football, fantasy-wise. Fact.
All right. Sorry I didn't make it harder for you this week, Bill.
Yeah, you made it no fun. You made it no fun.
Oh, I'll show you fun. All right, let's go to running back here. And running back James Cook for the Buffalo Bills. I'm sorry. He is projected 15.3 points at the New York Jets, who are allowing the 8th fewest points to opposing running backs. Monday Night Football. Listen, I think James Cook might have gotten banged up a little bit. I know he was showing as questionable on the ESPN Fantasy app. 15.3 is still a high projection, considering that the Bills have been really hit or miss on offense, and Robert Saleh is no longer with the New York Jets. I know they promoted their defensive coordinator, but I'd like to think that Saleh had more to do with that defense than people are giving him credit for. So that's why I sold on James Cook this week, not because they played against a really good defense, but because I legit don't know. I don't know what Buffalo is going to look like. I don't know what the Jets are going to look like. So I'm selling James Cook. Bill, what say you?
Finally, Ryan, you were wrong. James Cook has been one of the focal points of this offense. Josh Allen has not been very good the last couple of weeks, and James Cook continues to be, and I think he will continue to be the focal point of this offense. Yes, he is a little banged up. He's listed as questionable right now, but they do expect him to play. So I think this one's crap. I think you expect a decent game out of James Cook.
All right, so now I'm gonna go. Was that 6-0, and you're gonna go 5-1.
Wow,
this is gonna get
wow.
All right,
let's stick with this. Finally, not a low hanging fruit. Finally,
let's stick with this Jets Bills game, as I sell wide receiver Garrett Wilson, projected 16.6 at home against the Bills on Monday Night Football. The Bills are giving up the 5th fewest points to wide receivers this season. Listen, I know Aaron Rodgers is basically running the New York Jets at this point, but the offense has never been the strong suit for the New York Jets this season. There was a couple weeks ago, and it might have been last week, where Garrett Wilson was being fed targets, but nothing spectacular, nothing like beating people down the field, nothing like what Aaron Rodgers was doing with Devontae Adams in Green Bay, which is one of the reasons why I'm selling Garrett Wilson. I think the 16.6 is way too high of a projection for him right now. Bill, what say you, Garrett Wilson? Factor crap coming in under 16.6.
Ryan, 22 targets to the tune of 13 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. And you're like, not going to keep doing that. Nah, I think this one's crap. I think if you don't play Garrett Wilson and expect him to do well this week, you're crazy.
Well, I can't wait. Now I'm going to go 7-0. This is going to be fun.
You know.
All right. This is the lowest of low-hanging fruit that I've ever done on this show. My tight end that I'm selling this week is David Njoku, projected 9.7 at the Philadelphia Eagles, giving up the 4th fewest points to tight ends. David Njoku played 1 snap last week and apparently got hurt again. I don't think he's going to play this week. If you got somebody on a bye, if you were hoping that you could plug it, like last week, I had Sam Laporta on a bye, and I'm like, oh, Njoku's going to play. That's cool. I can just plug him in. This is the only game I need him for. He had 1 catch for 12 yards, and that was it. All right, I'm gonna go back, sit on the bench now, rest my ankle or whatever he's got hurt. I'm selling the 9.7 for Njoku because I don't think he plays. Bill, factor crap, selling David Njoku.
That's going to have to be a fact, Ryan. He was gone with an ankle injury. He played 25 plays and left with a knee injury. So Njoku probably not playing this week. He is questionable currently, but I mean, this one has to be a fact because you're crazy to keep him in your lineup at this point.
Dude, I was so mad because, like, legitimately, like, all I need is 1 week out of this kid. I will start I will start Sam Laporta every week. Except for this is the 1 week. I just show up. Just give me one decent game. Now, granted, I didn't need them. Like, listen, my entire roster was on a bye last week. Like, I had to pick up a new defense. I had to pick up a new kicker. I picked up Denver's defense, who had like 18 points for my team. I had a kicker who scored like 18. And I won that game in that league. And now I'm sitting in like 5th place, so right underneath the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
So I'd say I did pretty well considering that I had to start David Njoku at tight end.
I have a team of underachievers this week or this season, Ryan, where we average 135 points a game. My starting lineup does, but I've only been averaging. I mean, that's what they as a group average, and my team's only averaged 104. So underachieving every time I put them in. Fantastic.
You're not the only one. Real quick, College Shame Day over on Instagram said Kamara hasn't played a full season since 2017. He's selling. Too scared to get hit with that impending injury. I'm assuming he was talking about when we were talking about the Saints and whether or not we should be patient or panic with the New Orleans Saints. All right, folks, we've gone live. We're going to try to run through these games. We're at Podcast Pick'em for Week 7. If you paid attention to social media last week, Bill and I picked games and posted them to our Facebook. The prior week, Bill went 2-3. I went 3-2. Last week, we both went 2-3. Taking the only 2 games we got right were the Ravens over the Bengals, thanks to an overtime field goal by Justin Tucker, and Texas A&M blowing out Missouri. So the season standings sit at 13-17 for Banker Bill, and your guy Bully Rye is sitting at a whopping, a promising, an impressive 500 at 15-15. So let's see,
Ryan.
Let's see.
I had 63% correct last season.
Listen,
I mean, this is awful.
It's been one of those years, man. Listen, 1 year, like I said, I picked like the entire NFC North to the win totals 1 year. And then next year, like I couldn't get anything right, which was last year when you beat me. So let's get into the games this weekend. We got a couple of ranked versus ranked matchups. We are not picking Oklahoma against Texas in the Red River rivalry. But Bill, if you had to pick somebody in that game, I think we're both going with Texas.
Yes.
All right.
Texas.
A big showdown in the Big Ten as number 2 Ohio State travels to number 3 Oregon Saturday and 7:30 kickoff on NBC over at Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon. Ohio State, a 3-point favorite on the road. Bill, what say you, Ohio State, Oregon?
I have no idea. I mean, honestly, I have no idea. I have not watched either one of these teams play. I've not been impressed by Oregon's scores so far this season, but I mean, you've got 2 clearly fantastic teams. I mean,
I'll go ahead while you're thinking about it. I'll go ahead and pick it. I think Oregon is a. We talked about contenders and pretenders. Oregon has not looked impressive this year. They have had very close games with some very bad teams.
They've been better lately.
Who cares? They've been better lately. They still got to play Ohio State. Ohio State. They come to play against the big name teams outside of Michigan the last couple of years, except for the fact that Michigan was stealing signs. So they kind of knew what was coming.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, we could talk about that more because the Connor Stallions, everybody accuses South Carolina for using Connor Stallions to steal signs. And Connor Stallions this week said, I don't know anybody from South Carolina. So those folks that got really mad about us beating Tennessee a couple years ago can suck it. Give me Ohio State to win on the road, Bill. What say you? Ohio State, Oregon.
You know what? Ohio State hasn't played a decent team all season. They've killed everybody. The worst game they had was against Marshall. They gave up 14 points. They haven't given up anything more than a touchdown in every single other game. I don't know. I think you have to go with Ohio State on this one.
All right.
Oregon hasn't been impressive. Ohio State, they haven't played anybody. I don't know. It's tough.
All right. It should be a fun game, one of the 7:30 kickoffs. I'm going to have 2 TVs going so I can catch that game. And the next game we're going to talk about, a big SEC showdown. The Ole Miss Rebels, number 9 team in the country, coming off a big win at South Carolina, taking on a number 13 LSU Tigers. Saturday, 7:30 kickoff on ABC in the real Death Valley of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Tiger Stadium. Bill,
I know what you did there.
What I did there.
Yeah.
Anybody else listening knows what I did too. Bill, Ole Miss a 3.5-point road favorite at LSU. Who you got?
I think Ole Miss. Ole Miss in this one. I'm not feeling great about LSU. They lost to USC. USC's not looked good since, so I think Ole Miss.
Yeah, listen, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky a couple weeks ago. They were able to sort of avenge that loss by beating down South Carolina that both of us took to cover that 9-point spread last week. And they shut down South Carolina's offense, an offense that was what was absolutely purring against the their opponent this week, the LSU Tigers, until Lenora Sellers got hurt in the second quarter of that game. And listen, LSU has not looked good most of the season. Like you said, they lost to Southern Cal. For all intents and purposes, they very well should have lost to South Carolina. Give me Ole Miss to cover this 3.5 on the road, even in a very hostile environment down in Baton Rouge against LSU. Let's get the NFL games. We got Thursday Night Football. We've talked about both of these teams at length tonight. The San Francisco 49ers, a 3.5-point favorite on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. Bill, give me the Seahawks to cover, man. Like, the Seahawks are probably coming off a pretty, not probably, they're coming off a pretty embarrassing loss against the Giants. They get this game at home on a Thursday, and they're coming out for vengeance. The Niners haven't beaten a division opponent yet this year, and I don't think it happens this weekend. Even if they lose, it'll be a field goal game, and that means that the Seattle covers that spread. Give me Seattle. Bill, what say you?
Yeah, this is a heated rivalry. Do the 49ers get their players back? Do we have CMC's on IR, right? So does Debo come back at all this week?
Debo was back last week.
Oh, was he back last week? Oh, I didn't realize that. I was watching that game and I didn't realize that. How horrible is that?
Well, he also changed numbers. It was hard for me to pick up on it too.
That's fantastic.
He's usually
give me the Seahawks. Give me the Seahawks. I think Thursday Night Football, Seattle rocks, man. That's a crazy stadium. So I think they have to play better than they played against Giants last week, though. They were at home against the Giants, and the Giants beat them in their own field. Yeah. So,
by the way, College Shame Day took Ole Miss to win and cover the spread over LSU too. I wanted to go back and make sure I got that. Also, appreciate Nate joining the video if he's still in here. Friend of mine, I say a friend of mine is a guy that I do a lot of comedy with. Ron Eddy, it's his son in the video to catch some of the podcast. All right, the next NFL game we got coming up. We talked about this game at length too. The Washington Commanders are on the road to take on the Baltimore Ravens. The first real test for the Washington Commanders. I say real test. They had a game where it was a test, but it wasn't what you expect it to be. This is the first real team I feel like the Washington has to play on the road. Baltimore normally gets a lot of home cooking from the officials when they're playing. Yeah, in Baltimore, it's a Sunday 1:00 kickoff though, so they get them early in the day. The Ravens are a 6.5-point home favorite. Bill, what say you? Baltimore hosting the surprising 4-1 Commanders.
I really like Jaden Daniels. We know this. I've been singing his praises, and since draft time, I was saying he was the best quarterback in the draft. However, the Ravens are cooking right now, man. They're cooking 3 in a row, and they're at home. They dismantle teams in Baltimore. So give me the Ravens to cover that. It's a big spread, but give me the Ravens to cover it.
Because it's a big spread, and because Washington has looked so good, albeit with a loss. I mean, the Ravens have lost. I mean, they started off really, really bad. I think the Ravens win this game, but I think Washington covers. Give me the Commanders to cover the spread. I think it's going to be closer than people expect.
The Ravens beat the Bills 35-10.
I'm aware. But the Bills always have those down games every year.
Okay.
So, yeah, give me the Commanders. Finally, the last game we're picking, not because I'm a homer, but because it's a rematch of a game that's ended in controversy last year. The Detroit Lions get a rematch against the Dallas Cowboys on the road. The Lions coming off a bye week, not that they were banged up or anything, but get healthier and get a nice little rest to go on the road to take on the Dallas Cowboys. Sunday, 4:25 kickoff on Fox. The Lions, a 3-point road favorite. Bill, what say you? Lions at Cowboys.
You know what? I hope the Lions smash the whatever off of the Cowboys. They owe them one. This is the reason the Lions did not win the Super Bowl last season, because yes, he did say he was an eligible receiver. BS that the NFL ever said. No, I never, whatever. That was garbage. This game needs to happen. The Lions need to win this game. The Lions do win this game. The Cowboys stink.
The Lions have had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They've sort of struggled offensively some throughout the year. Last week that they played, Sam Laporta got more involved in this offense, and the team, the offense sort of sparked. 42 points 2 weeks ago. They were able to win, to put on the board. Again, probably the best 1-2 punch at running back in the NFL. a very underrated Jared Goff. You combine Amon-Ra St. Brown with a Jameson Williams, who is finally coming into his own here in year 3. Pedro also says Cowboys need to lose every week. Happy NFL season for us all. And I think the Lions just have, I mean, and listen, the Cowboys are playing angry too. The Cowboys are not looking great. Dak has looked sort of lost. The running games, they don't know who's going to lead the running game. It looks like Rico Dowdle, but people also don't expect him to do much. Give me the Lions to cover this 3-point spread and get revenge, because like you said, the Lions beat the Cowboys last season. They host a playoff game instead of having to go on the road to San Francisco in the NFC Championship game, and I think that changes that game and how it plays out. And then I think the Lions beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl last year, how they won that game. Nevertheless, the Lions over the Cowboys this week. Bill, we are not doing overtime because we are already 15 minutes over. So let's wrap this show up. Facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns. If you weren't watching tonight, make sure you go follow that page on Facebook. If you were watching that show tonight on Facebook, thank you for being here. Tell your friends about it. Come join us every Wednesday to talk all things football. Over on X, even though we don't go live on there, I do post. I have been tweeting a lot over on X.
Because he's bored.
Yeah, I get bored a lot. Over on X, at Tapouts and TDs. If you watched over on YouTube tonight, YouTube at Tapouts and Touchdowns, thank you for doing so as well. Make sure you share that page and subscribe to the YouTube channel so we can sort of do some more there. And then over on Instagram, we actually had a lot of activity on the Instagram chat at Ryan Frick Comedy tonight. College Shame Day also mentioned, I think he was talking about the Lions Cowboys would be, oh no, it was the game prior to that. Seahawks Niners, I think maybe one score game. He also said the Lions crushing the Cowboys, further cementing McCarthy's inevitable firing before Halloween. So make sure you go follow the page at Ryan Frick Comedy on Instagram. Share that profile. Make sure people have access to it. So that they can watch the show live on Instagram like we go every week. We had a wrestling show come out last week. We will have another wrestling show, the part 2 of the review and crossover with the Whatever Face podcast, where we talk about the Vince McMahon documentary over on Netflix. And then more football talk next week with your guy, Bully Rye and Banker Bill. Thanks everybody who was a part of the show tonight, whether you're watching on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We always appreciate the comments. Please always send them in. And like Volley Polly does, send us a message on social media if you've got questions before the show that you would like us to bring to the show and answer live when we talk with you. Thanks everybody for being part of the show. We'll see you next time. For Banker Bill, it's your guy, Bully Rye. We'll see you next time right here on Tap House and Touchdowns.